Bom dia. Did I just speak Catalan? Excellent. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Atlas for the Future, for making this happen. This is actually quite a dangerous talk for me, because if I say the word donut, I might get sued. So I'm going to be careful here. The ironies of intellectual property rights. Huh? So, we've all gathered here today to fix the future. Well, if we're going to fix the future, and if Mark is right that it's going to be messy, then there's one thing we really need, is a compass. And I want to offer you a compass. Now, I'm going to talk about donuts, rosquilla. Here's the health warning. Don't eat too many of them, okay? They're not that good for you. I'm going to introduce you to the one donut, rosquilla, that is actually going to turn out to be good for us. It's the compass I believe that we need for the 21st century. Yes, it looks that familiar shape. Let me tell you about this picture, and I can do it for you in Spanish. Let me start with the English. The hole in the middle is a place where people are falling short on life's essentials. People don't have the food or healthcare, education, housing, access to electricity, political voice, gender equality, the essentials of life that every human being has a claim to. The world's governments agree. I crowdsourced these 12 social essentials from the Sustainable Development Goals. So every human being in the world has a claim to meeting these. And they are, of course, deeply rooted in human rights. So we want to get everybody out of that hole in the middle. Let's switch to the Spanish one. But, and it's a big but, we can't overshoot that outer ring, because there we begin to put so much pressure on this extraordinary, unique, delicately balanced, living planet that we would begin to kick it out of balance. We cause climate breakdown, acidify the oceans, a hole in the ozone layer, catastrophic biodiversity loss. And these 9 dimensions around the outside of the donut, these are the 9 planetary boundaries drawn up by Earth system scientists. They believe these represent the 9 critical life-supporting systems that keep our planet in the extraordinary benevolent state that it's been in for the last 11,000 years. We'd be crazy to kick ourselves out of that balance. So, in the simplest terms, I could say that this is a compass for meeting the needs of all within the means of the planet. And if it is, then you want to know where the needles are pointing on this compass. And that's not an easy picture to look at. Because on every one of those social dimensions, there are millions or billions of people in the world still falling short. On food, there at the top, that goes 11% of the way to the middle of the circle, because 11% of people worldwide don't have enough food to eat every day. On water, next to it, 9% of people don't have access to clean water. 1 person in 3 doesn't have access to what we would call a toilet. But on every one of these social dimensions, there are people in countries rich and poor falling short. And yet, we've already overshot at least 4 of these planetary boundaries: on climate change, on biodiversity loss, excessive nitrogen and phosphorus in fertilizer that doesn't get taken up by plants but leaches out into lakes and rivers and kills off life, and land conversion. So, this is the state of humanity and our planetary home. It's our selfie. We, the people of the early 21st century, this is our portrait. We are the first generation. Yeah, I see. It's call now. This is very important to take action. I'm glad that some people immediately feel motivated to take action. That should be the response. Because we are the first generation to see this picture. The economists of last century, they never saw this picture. Why would we imagine that their theories would be up to taking on its challenges? The politicians, the business leaders, the community activists of last century never saw this picture. This belongs to us. So how are we going to respond to it? I believe this is the image and the legacy for which our children's children will look back and remember us and judge us. We, as the first generation to see this, did we also begin to turn the story around? Will we start to be the first generation that actually starts putting humanity on track to meet the needs of all and come back within the means of the planet? And what the heck would it look like to do that? Now, imagine putting your own life on this table and asking yourself, how does the way that I shop, eat, travel, bank, invest, divest, protest, vote, volunteer, all the ways that I interact as a citizen in the world, how is my life contributing to humanity's chance of meeting the needs of all within the means of the planet? What if every company in the world drew up its corporate strategy at this table and asked itself, does the way that we do business, not the philanthropy on the side, but the core business, is it helping to bring humanity into this space? Or, let's be honest with ourselves, actually pushing humanity out? What about the way we design cities? I was excited last year to be contacted by urban designers in Stockholm who said, we're creating a new suburb of Stockholm here, 15 minutes by train from downtown. And we're using your Doughnut as an aspirational blueprint. How can we design this suburb to meet the needs of all its residents while respecting the ecosystem into which we're building it? And I was really honored to find out that in China, when the China's Renewable Energy Center launched the Renewable Energy Report describing how China is going to shift from having fossil fuel-based economy to renewable energy, the professor launching the report showed this Doughnut as his second slide, alongside a quote from the President for Life, saying that man must learn to live in harmony with nature. So there are big changes going on from our personal to the business, to the city, to the nation. And I believe in all of this, we need to put two design principles at the heart of the 21st century economy. We need to create economies and businesses that are distributive by design and regenerative by design. And I'm excited because I know that a lot of the people doing interesting and exciting work in this area are sitting here and are going to tell us about it today. So let me just tell a little bit about what I mean by these design principles. Distributive by design. Today's economy is divisive. The returns from enterprise, the returns from growth are accumulating in the hands of a 1%. And there's no reason that it should be this way. Can we not create economies that distribute value created far more equitably through the structure of enterprise, the structure of energy, of ideas? Let me share with you some examples. In Argentina and Chile, many people can't afford to buy a house. So the architect Alejandro Aravena said, maybe they can afford to buy half a house. And he started to build half houses with the electricity, the water, all the piping that you need in a home, so that people could at last own a home. Then, when they have saved more money, they can fill it in. It's a more distributive design of housing, making it accessible to more people. Energy. In the 20th century, energy systems were owned by an oil rig here, a coal mine here, a natural gas pipe here, sold to every household. But in the 21st century, you can have your own power station on the roof or in a field owned by the community. This is distributively owned energy systems. For the first time in human history, the technology of energy is on our side. It is distributive by design. Can we harness that opportunity? This, I know, looks like a rock concert, but it's not. It actually took place here in Barcelona. It's a software developers conference because Drupal is an open source software used by people who together co-create the code. And they come together once a year and have a big meeting. Think of every company in the world, how they would love to have this research and development team, this passion, this commitment to co-creating something that exists in the commons. This is the distributive design of ideas in the 21st century. What about regenerative by design? Through the middle of this diagram is the degenerative, linear 20th century economy. We take Earth's materials, we make them into stuff we want, we use it, often once, and then we throw it away. And this take, make, use, lose, cuts against the cycles of the living world and pushes us over planetary boundaries. So we need to bend those arrows around so that we are regenerating Earth's living systems, allowing nature to do what she's been doing for 3.8 billion years, breaking things down into carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and building them up again. But also with synthetic materials like this little clicker. Many of the materials in this room that are made by humans, never to be thrown away, but to be reused, refurbished, recycled. This is the beginnings of an economy that works within the cycles of the living world and runs on sunlight. In the slums of Kenya, one of the places where there were no toilets, now there are, because Sanergy has created a franchise of toilets throughout the community. People, for the first time, can use a toilet that is clean, with clean water, soap, and toilet paper. That brings dignity. It also brings health. And it creates jobs through the community. And that waste is collected every day and turned into organic fertilizer. So they're closing the loop of nitrogen, but at the same time, creating prosperity in the community. At the other end of this circular economy innovation scheme is Open Motors. If you buy one of their cars, it will arrive like this, like a wardrobe from IKEA. And they say that if you know what you're doing, you can assemble it in less than an hour. You really need to know what you're doing. But if you don't know what you're doing, the good news is you can take it to somebody who does. Because the design for this car is open source, available on the internet, so anybody can see how it's made, how to assemble it. And this is just a basic chassis. It's 100% electric, modular by design, so you can replace just one part. Then you can customize it. It can be an airport golf cubby. It can be a streetcar made to work in the location that you are. I live in the city of Oxford, where all mini cars are produced. Each one rolls out of the factory and is shipped around the world full of air. I believe this century we should be shipping the parts and distributing and manufacturing, assembling and customizing in a distributed way. This is the beginning of 21st century distributive industry. And here's the Swedish sports company Houdini. All of their clothing is made either from wool and tencel, which are organic fibers, In fact, they take them back, they put them in a compost bin, turned it into soil, grew mushrooms on top, and then served it to their customers and said, "You're eating your sportswear." All their clothes are made from recycled polyester and recycled nylon. So they've got an organic loop and a synthetic loop. They're creating a circular economy of material reuse, which means you have to send your clothes back to Houdini at the moment. And of course, Houdini's clothing is not cheap. Of course it's not. Just like in 1975, it was expensive to put a solar panel on the roof of your house. But once this becomes the norm, once this becomes standard practice, the costs come sliding down. And once circular material reuse becomes standard practice, this will be the normal, affordable, sustainable way of producing clothing. Houdini are just way ahead of the curve. So I believe we need economies that are distributive by design, sharing the sources of wealth creation far more equitably throughout society, so we don't see this divisive 1%. And we need economies that are regenerative by design, working with and within the cycles of the living world. And I invite you to listen here today to all the incredible examples and cases that are going to stand on this stage. I believe you will hear the intention of distributive design and regenerative design at the heart of what they're doing. But we have an existential challenge that we need to take on, because the 20th century shape of progress was a line of ever-rising GDP. In Western society, there's a deep addiction to the idea that progress is always forwards and up. One of the reasons that we're so addicted to this idea of GDP growth is because our economies have become financially, politically, and socially addicted to ever-rising GDP. Financially, because at the heart of the finance system is that pursuit of the highest rate of return. And shareholder-owned companies are under pressure every quarter to show that they have rising sales, rising profits, and rising market share, and this drives growth. We're politically addicted to unending growth because no politician wants to lose their place in the G20 family photo. But if their economy stops growing, while everybody else keeps going, they'll be booted out by the next powerhouse. And most countries have structured their pension schemes on the assumption of future growth. And we're socially addicted to unending GDP growth because after a century of consumerist propaganda, we've been convinced that we improve ourselves by buying something more. I don't think any of these addictions are insurmountable, but they all deserve far more attention than they currently get. Because think outside this room, look to nature. Nothing in nature grows forever. In nature, growth from your children's feet to the Amazon forest to the bulbs in your garden, growth is a wonderful, healthy phase, but then things grow up and they mature and they thrive, and they can thrive for a long, long time. But growth is different from thriving. So why would we imagine that our economies could be the one system that actually bucks this trend? Because we have another understanding of growth too. Yes, growth is a wonderful, healthy phase, but if I told you that my friend went to the doctor and he said she had a growth, we understand that very differently too. Because growth that tries to grow forever in a healthy system destroys the system on which it depends, and it must be stopped. So I believe we need to create economies that grow and then grow up, that thrive by becoming regenerative and distributive by design. This is the existential challenge for the 21st century. And today we can celebrate these ideas of distributive and regenerative design that are already happening, showing us that we are indeed beginning to fix this future. If you're interested in these ideas, you can watch 1-minute animations of Doughnut Economics, the 7 ways to think, or better still, join the discussion in English or in Spanish, or you could start one in Catalan. Because I believe we need to have a big conversation about the kind of economy we want to create. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.